Alright, welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and the Plastic Models for Beginners, back to basics with the Tamiya 1/48 scale F4F-4. So where I left off last time, I'd completed construction except for the parts I'm going to install after painting, and wanted to do some masking and get ready for the primer coat. So I've got everything masked. I masked around the engine. I masked the cockpit. Masked the windows. Masked the gear bays. Then let's see. Then I masked the inside of the cowling. So that's all ready to go. Propeller's ready. So let's begin with primer. So I've already thoroughly shaken and stirred the Stynel Res primer, which is my primer of choice. And I'm using my Iwata HPM2. Single action airbrush. And I'm also going to use a glove, black nitrile glove. So when I'm holding and I spray, I don't get it on my hands. So let me fill up the color cup first. Set that aside, and we are ready to go. So I'm going to do these gear bay doors first. Get the edges. Now the nice thing about this primer is, as some people say, you can really hose it on because of its self-leveling properties. It is super good stuff for leveling out. So it's not necessary to do a whole bunch of thin coats or anything weird like that. You can just spray it on and rest assured that it's going to fill in and level out and be really smooth. So there's that. So I'm going to do these other small parts before I go on to that. Okay, I've got all the smaller parts sprayed, so now it's time to do the fuselage. So, I'm probably not going to show the whole deal on this either, but at least I want to give you an idea what's going on here. Now, as you see here, I'm not having any trouble with tip dry or splattering or any of that kind of nonsense. And that's because Styrylrez is a really good primer. If I'd been using Vallejo, and again, I know lots of people use it with great results. I don't. I would be having problems like crazy right about now. So that's why I use Styrylrez. So I'm going to continue on with this and get it all primed and come back. And there it is. It's all primed, ready for paint once it dries. So we'll let this cure up for some hours, and then we'll be ready for some paint. Alright, hi and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude, and part 6 of the Back to Basics Plastic Models for Beginners with Tamiya 1/48 scale Grumman F4F-4 Wildcat. So in this episode, we are going to mix up some paint for the exterior colors. So for the kit I am doing, or for the color scheme I'm doing this one right here, VF41 aboard USS Ranger. So the colors I need are the upper surface color and lower surface color. Upper surface color is a mixture of XF18 medium blue and XF2 flat white. Now if you'll remember, in one of the earlier episodes I mixed up a batch of interior green. I showed you how to mix that up. So I'm going to do it again, but I'm not going to go through the whole rigmarole. So I'm going to go ahead and off camera stir these things up with my Badger stir device, and then we'll mix some paint up and put them in these little bottles here. Alright, so the formula for the lower color is 2 parts XF19, 2 parts 1 part XF2. So let's start off with a basic, we'll go up to my line here, which is I think 1.5 milliliters. That's the white. And then XF18, and we're doing the upper color, not the lower color first. So it's 3 parts XF18, so that'll be 3 of my little droppers here. One. Okay, I got to start this over because I went too high on my paint. So what happened was is whenever I drew my paint up in here, I went a little bit past that mark, so I had to clean the thing out and start over. So I've got one part in. I need 2 more parts, so I just need to be careful I don't go up and over my line when I'm drawing it in like that. And that's why I like to mix up a little bit more than what I might need, because that way I don't have to mix up anymore and hope I get the right color again. And there's 3. So next I need to, so that's 4 parts. So I'm going to, I think, do 50% thinner and see how that looks, because that should be pretty good. So let me cap up my bottles here. And then my X20A. We'll do 2 parts thinner. We'll shake that up and see how it looks. All right, so there's the first color. That doesn't give us very good representation through the bottle, but it looks pretty good. There you go. That's what it looks like. So I'm thinking that's going to work just fine. And I should have enough to spray the whole thing. If not, then I'm going to be sad. So I'm going to let that settle and see how much I have. And in the meantime, we'll mix up the white, or the lighter color for down below, the lower part of the aircraft. All right, it's mixed up, so let's see, same thing. Let's go with the gray first. Now this one, it's a smaller amount, and because it's white, it's going to take more to cover, so I think I'm going to double this. So it's calling for XF19, which is sky gray, and XF2, which is white. It's calling for 2 parts 19, 1 part flat white. So I'm going to go with 4 parts of 19 and 2 parts of XF2. So let's get in the other bottle, and we'll do this. So we need 4 parts of this. So you know what? I think though I'm going to do, so that'd be 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to do 3 parts. I'm going to put the thinner in first this time, and it'll help keep the paint from settling on the bottom, and it should mix easier. Two, three. All right. That, and then let's go 4 of the gray, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 of that, and I got some on the outside, so I need to clean that off or it's going to drive me crazy. Okay, let's get this cleaned off right there. There's nothing worse than getting paint on the outside of a bottle. If you'll notice, my Tamiya jars, even though they get used frequently, are clean. It's one of my things. All right, so we need 2 parts of the XF2. So let's go, let's see. One and 2. All right, so the colors are mixed up and they're ready to go. So I'm going to set my instructions out of sight here so I can see my template here. So I'm going to use, for the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and use my regular old handy dandy single action HPM2, because I don't have to be real super careful. So the first thing I'm going to paint these gear doors right here, and then I'll paint the smaller parts. Now you can see I've attached the cowling on here. I put a piece of tape in there to cover that up, and I put a piece of tape in there to keep the engine from getting, you know, messed up. But I'm going to set this aside for now so I can do the other parts. So let me get my stand. So we're doing the lighter color first. Make sure it's thoroughly shaken. See, that looks pretty good. That looks like a good color. So I'm going to do, let's do this small part here first, since it's small. Make sure it's going to look good. Yeah. I got just the right viscosity to cover it well. Okay, so there is the first one. Then we got the, drop tanks. I'm going to kind of layer this up since I don't want to get any runs or anything, which I generally don't have a problem with that with the Tamiya paint, but just habit. Okay, let's put that aside. That. So now let's work on the fuselage. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and paint these gear doors. That's a pretty good color. I like that. All right, so we got that. All right, so here it is so far. So I'm gonna have to put a little bit more because you can see it's kind of a little bit transparent in places, but I don't want to put on too much at once. So I'm gonna set that aside, and then I'm gonna put another coat on the drop tanks, and those should be done. First, I need to refill my paint cup. All right, we're back in business. Jeez. Whoops. That popped off. So let's put it back on. All right. Disaster averted. That part's still looking good. I'll just give it a quick once over. That's good. So now let's go back to the fuselage. All right. So, oh man. It's just to make the coating a little more even. So that's making it a little more opaque. And right now you don't have to worry about overspray because we still have to do the upper color. So I'm going to continue on with this and come back. All right, so here is the lower fuselage color completed, and looking pretty good. So I just want to make a quick note here. If you can see here all these rivet detail, if you have a kit that has really refined detail, recessed detail in it, that saves you a bit on having to rely on panel line washes and stuff like that to fill that stuff in to make it look, to make it pop, to make it look more quote unquote realistic. Something like that, it's so nice you don't have to do anything like that. You can see it perfectly fine without having to worry about putting any kind of stuff on it. Now I'm not saying that's, you should do that, because if you want to, then have at it, but for beginning modelers, when this stuff can be kind of intimidating, you can still get a decent looking model without having to do that kind of stuff necessarily. So anyway, I'll come back in a little while when this is dried really well, and we'll start working on our upper surface colors. Okay, so I've got my top color. Now there's a few things I need to talk about here. So first thing I did when doing, and this is just to show you that you can use a single action airbrush for basic fine work. it won't work with all things, but in this case we should be fine. So first thing I did is I turned my pressure down from about 16 down to about, it's about 12 whenever the pressure drops. So I did that. Then the next thing is I remove this protective cap right here. And you'll want to be careful that you don't whack that needle on anything, because you bend the needle, you're going to have to get a new one. Okay, so that's the next thing I've done. Now, as you can see here, I've got a test mule that I use for practicing on. It's an old Lindbergh P47, came from a set. But anyway, you can see I've done a little bit of practice work here. Now, right there, I had the I had it open too much, and it splurted out a big bunch of it. So what I want to do is just open it just a little bit and test it out. Okay, so I got nothing there. A little bit more. A little bit more. There we go. So you can see I've been able to get a pretty good covering. The main thing I want to do is be able to make a nice even line without a bunch of overspray, hence turning the pressure down. So that's why I did that. So the next thing we're going to do is actually try it on the model. So using the instructions as a guide, we need to do the edges. So the first edge goes from, as I mentioned earlier, it's just above this panel line right here. So it comes back and then it drifts up to the under part of the wing of the fuselage here. It kind of comes straight back and makes a sharp turn and goes up here. Okay, so pretty much all this part right here is going to be blue. So going to test a little bit. Okay, so I got a little bit going there. So what I need to do is very carefully do my first line. And normally I would use my double action airbrush for this because it's a lot more controllable, but I want to show it can be done with a single action for those who can't afford more than one airbrush. So I'm just barely letting any come out, and I'm going to build it up. That way I won't risk messing anything up. Okay, so I've got that much so far. It's not as, there we go. Okay, so we've got that much. Make sure to get across the front here. All right, so that will take care of that part. And I'll just do it on this side and show you how I'm doing it, and then I'll do the other side off camera. So then in the back, it's pretty sharp, and then along that rivet line that I showed earlier. So I'm going to do the same thing. Get a little bit going in your brush before you stick to the model. So let's see. So I want to curve from here down to just above that line. So I'm going to start back here. Now you can mask this, there's ways to mask it, but I'm trying to show how to do it freehand. Now I know I'm blocking it a little bit, I'm trying to do it so you can see it, but now if you get a little bit kind of weird, you can always touch that up later with your white. Or just try and blend it in a little bit. Like that. Okay, so that's the other edge. Okay, so there's the edges. And once you have your edge the way you want it, then you can open it up a little bit to spray the rest of it. All right, so I'm going to do the other side real quick and come back. Okay, so I've got that side done. So now it's just a matter of filling it in. So I'm still keeping it close so I don't get a bunch of overspray. And I'm just filling it in. Now you want to be careful and not get it on here. So you're going to have to be very careful and get in very close. Like that, and not get any on that stabilizer. Okay, so there it is. That's the way it's looking. Now you'll notice it's a little bit of slightly bit blotchy, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're going to weather your aircraft, it will give it a little bit of a weathered look. Instead of just a plain, lovely paint job. Okay, and remember, if you get a little bit overspray on something, you can always come back later and fix that. Okay, so I'm going to continue on painting the rest of this stuff, and we'll come back. Okay, so I took the masking off of the cockpit because I want to now glue these in place, so as I paint, I will paint the frames of the windscreen and the canopy. Yeah, the canopy. So I'm going to put my, you know what, first thing I'm going to do though is I need to glue the gun sight in place. So I got a little dab of super glue, gel type, and there we go. So I'll be careful and not touch that. And then get my windscreen. Get this little blob of glue off the tip there. Get this glued on if I don't drop it. And if any of this is on the squeezes out a little bit, when I paint over, it'll dull out any shininess. Okay, I'm going to let that set up for a few minutes. And while that's setting up, I'm going to go ahead and spray some more of the wings. So let me show you real quick, like another benefit of this this thing here. You can lower one side and have the other raised, and it'll give you a little bit of an angle to help with things. All right, so let's go ahead and spray some more of this. See, I'm not being real uniform in the way I'm applying this. And this is not some revelation that I've had on how to do this. This is kind of a weak attempt at a technique called black basing. And if you'd like to see anything about black basing, check out Duke's. It's called Duke's Models or something like that. I'll try and look up the name of it. Put a link in the description, which I'll probably forget to do since, you know, I do that frequently. But this is just a loose interpretation of what he does, and he gets some really awesome finishes on aircraft that look extremely realistic as far as the weathering and all that kind of stuff. Just trying to give it kind of a and then I'm going to spray another mist coat over top of it once it's all done, just to give it a real nice kind of blend it all in and make it look like I didn't just do a weak paint job on it. So I'm going to continue on with this and then come back. Alright, so I've got the canopy and the windscreen in place, so I'm going to spray that. Oh man, I have to be careful. So Let's get this sprayed on here. Whoa, I gotta back it off a little bit. Don't want to do too much. I don't want to make it too opaque around the edges. Be careful. Just a matter of spraying it and making sure you get good coverage so the light doesn't shine through. Because once you pull the mask off, you're committed. Don't forget the back. So there's that. So I'm going to now reload this thing and spray like an overall coat on it. So, and that'll just kind of blend that patchiness in a little bit, where it's not quite so patchy looking. It's not quite so harsh. Do the same thing. Fix any spots that are overly transparent. Careful that I don't stick my fingers in it. It's kind of a nice thing about this Tamiya paint is it dries really, really fast. So as you can see, I'm handling it without marring the finish. And that should do it for now. Okay, so the paint is done on the upper and lower surfaces, and I'm pretty stoked with the way it turned out. I really like the colors. Yeah, I'm digging it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I need to do some spraying on the propeller. So I'm going to use metal color burnt iron for the middle. Why am I using burnt iron, you ask? Well, the instructions call for a mix of Tamiya silver and orange, which is kind of weird. So I'm thinking they're wanting kind of an orangish yellow, and this one I think will do nicely. My cutting corners, maybe a little bit, but that's what I want to do. I want to use this. Actually, what I think I'm going to do, I think I'm going to use a mixture, half and half, of the burnt iron and silver for the prop hub. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 of the burnt iron and 1, 2, 3 of silver. Now I'll just make it darken it up a little bit, and it won't be like a pure steel color, but yeah, it looks pretty good. I think that'll work. Clean the brush off here real quick, my mixing brush, and then spray it on here, see what it looks. Yeah, I like that. It's not a pure silver, but it's not too dark either. So that looks pretty good. I like that one. So let me clean my brush. All right, next up, I need to spray the tips of the propellers. And for that, I'm going to use Tamiya XF3. I've already mixed it in the jar. And so now I'm going to add some X20A from my little dropper bottle. And some paint. Instead of messing with a dropper, I'm just making a little bit here. It's not going to take much to do those tips. And these little stir sticks come in handy with that little spoon thing. Then I will use my brush, mix it all up. And let's see what I got here. Okay, let that dry just for a second. Not clean out my airbrush because I'm going to put another layer on. But while that first little bit is drying, I'll put my paint up. And then let's give it another shot here. Light colors are pretty tough on black primer, so it's going to take a couple of shots. So we'll let that dry for a second. Alright, and the last thing I should have to spray is the interior of the landing bay or the landing gear doors. So with my previously mixed US interior green, put a couple of drops in the old airbrush. Should be plenty. Make sure they're stuck on here good so they don't go flying off into oblivion somewhere. And voila! So I'm going to clean this airbrush and then we'll do a little bit of detail painting on the main part of the aircraft. Okay, so the propeller's done and turned out pretty good. I like it. So we'll set that aside with the landing gear for later installation. Right now, it is time to do some detail painting. So first, I need to do this wheel, and then I'm going to do the exhaust. So here's what I'm going to do here. Give me a little bit of paint right there. I got to clean that bottle. It's a filthy, disgusting mess. Shameful. Okay, and then wheel painted. Now, oddly enough, boy, I'm shaking like a leaf. I had a cup of coffee just a little while ago, so we'll see how this turns out. The Edward mask set comes with masks for the wheels. I think I mentioned that. But why you'd want to mask this little tiny wheel in the back, I don't know. But they're there if you want them. I'm going to have to go out of frame. Oh, maybe I won't be out of frame. Let's see. Yeah, not too bad. Let's move that. It's not like you really need to see what I'm doing here. But if I'm going to have it running, now the nice thing is the molding on this wheel is really good. There's really good definition between the hub and the tire. So it's easy, well, somewhat easy to paint it without messing anything up. Now that I've said that, I'll probably will mess it up, but there's a slight undercut where the wheel meets the tail gear assembly, that kind of forked part. Which is nice because it makes it easier to paint along the edge. It's probably freaking you guys out watching me try and paint being this shaky, but Now there are tricks to painting real fine stuff like that that I will get into some other time. Oh, one more thing. I'm going to paint inside the exhaust here with black, and I'm not going to be real careful because it's going to be getting some paint. Just don't want that just to be a stark light color. But there are tricks that make painting wheels and stuff like that a lot easier, but I'll get into that some other time. So there's that. So the only other thing I really need to detail paint, well, I mean, there's other things, but when that black dries, I need to do the outside of the exhaust. So I also need to paint the lights. I also need to paint the lights. So we've got a light right here, and then we have lights here, here, and you can barely see it there. It's one of the problems with having to clean up around detail like that and gluing these. The molding wasn't as deep, the engraving wasn't as deep on this, and that, in addition to sanding that to make it smooth, you can barely see that light, so we'll just have to do the best we can with that. But we have those lights, and then this landing light underneath the wing here. So what we'll do is first, let's see, I need some silver, and I'll use the silver that I had used earlier, but I'm not spraying it this time. What we're gonna do is right here where the, oh my word, so you gotta be careful, I almost broke that. I gotta glue that on there. I am going to paint this silver, and then when I glue the clear lens on it, it'll give it a little bit more appearance of a light as opposed to just a piece of clear plastic. And what I'll probably do is I'll probably then we're going to do the silver inside of here. And again, you know, I'm not going to have to be real super careful, because when I glue that on, it's going to be distorted, and all you're wanting to do is pick up a little bit of reflectivity in there. So I'll just kind of fill the bottom up like that. And then on the back of that landing light, or that wing light, I am going to, whoops, put a dab of paint on the back of that as well, especially around the pin that goes in the hole in the wing. To add a little bit more reflection. Okay, so we'll let that dry for a minute, and I will get my other colors for the wing lights, or the under fuselage lights there. I'll get those ready. All right, for the landing lights, I'm going to be using my Vallejo model color and a little bit of distilled water. Doesn't have to be distilled, but that's what I have. So the front light is red. So this one here is red. This one is green. And this one is orange. And I think what I'm going to do to make that a little bit easier to paint, I'm going to check something here. Okay, well, here's what I discovered. This on that masking set, there's a piece, as you can see here, with 3 little holes punched in it. Pull those out and it lines up perfectly, so it'll make it a little bit easier to paint. Now, I normally do this freehand, but the reason I'm not doing it freehand this time is because of that little hole there. So that's the only reason. It can be easily done with a brush, but I'm cheating this time. So let's see. I'm going to do these colors first. Yeah, I've got a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow. And what I'm going to do first is paint the red light, which is up here. So give me a little bit of still water, because I don't want the paint too thick. And then carefully, I don't want to get too crazy, but so there's that. And then taking just a little bit of the yellow, make some orange. Tip of the day, don't drink much coffee when you haven't eaten much. Okay, and the orange is the back color, so let's put that on there. And this is the main reason I decided to use this mask, is since that part in the back isn't as defined. Doing that a little bit more, man. Shaking. All right, so I got those, and then a little bit of green. That one there. Okay, and while that is drying, we'll get the clear part for here. Okay, so on the clear part, there is a little bump, which I'm assuming is supposed to be some kind of light bulb or something. So put that facing down. And then using my clear parts glue, put a little bit in here. That. And then hopefully drop this cleanly into place. Just like that. Now it's looking a little cloudy, but once that glue dries, it'll be nice and clear. So while that's doing that, we'll take this part here and do the same thing. A little bit of clear part cement. there. And drop it in there crooked. Oh my word. Drop that into place like that. So there's that part. Don't really like it, but you know what? I'm going to take that off and flip it around and see if it makes a difference. Okay, flipping that around did help a little bit. It lined up a little bit better. So there's that. Let's go ahead and take the tape off of here. And it's not too shabby. Might put a little dab of gloss on there just to make it shinier, but we'll see. All right, so I think the last thing I need to paint will be the exhaust. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use kind of a brownish tan color for that to kind of simulate rust. I also need to, let's see, I need to paint this, the pitot tube. I need to paint that silver as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that while I've got my brushes handy here. I'm going to show you something real quick with the silver paint from Vallejo or any of their metal colors. When you look on the bottom here, see that kind of solid looking stuff there? That's the pigment. All these bubbles, that's where the pigment has, it was solid like that across the bottom. So that's how you know you're getting this stuff shaken up well. See, all the pigment, solid pigment is off the bottom now, so it's good to go as far as paint. All right, so now it's mixed up. I will attempt to paint the pitot tube. Whoops, out of frame. Sorry, guys. Just like that. All right, so there's that. So next, after I clean my brush, we're going to paint the exhaust. Okay, so I'm going to use model color tan earth, and what I'm trying to do here is simulate a rusty color. But generally, I mean, sometimes they do, but generally, the rust on an aircraft pipe, I mean, at least from photos I've seen, it's more of a, you know, it's not a red rusty color like you'd see on a vehicle exhaust. It's more of a heat kind of stuff, and it's kind of a dusty tan color. You know, so you can take that for what it's worth. I'm no expert, but hey, that's what I see. So we'll pop the cowling off there, which is part of the reason I have not glued it on there yet, is to make it easier to paint those. So use a little bit of water, and just carefully paint it. Like that. Get the front and then get the top. I got a little bit on the inside there, which is kind of a bummer, but I can fix it, I guess. Go all the way around. Alright, so there's that. So we'll put that there and let that dry for a few minutes. Alright, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and glue the I'm going to glue this on. And I'm going to use my little bit thicker glue for this. So I'll put some there and some right there. That one in that, and that there. And I'm going to rest it upside down so it doesn't really, let's see, nope, I better do it this way. Because I don't want the cowling to get pushed out of place. I don't want it to get bent out of shape. So I'm going to raise this up like that. Rest it like that. So we'll let that dry for a little while and then come back. Alright, so all the painting is done, including the detail painting. I've got the cowling glued on. So there are just a few things left, and that would be decals and then gluing the final, or attaching the final parts, such as the landing gear and the propeller and the drop tanks. So I think with that, I'm going to end this here, and the next one will be just purely decal, final assembly, and then on to a final reveal. So we're going to end this right here. So thanks for joining me here on Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and Back to Basics with the Tamiya 1/48 scale F4F-4 Wildcat. So until next time, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, tips, hints, anything like that, put them in the comments below and I will reply as soon as I can. So until next time, I will see you all later.